Hey everyone, it's Brave here again. I've got a new poem I've written, and it's to do with my ancestors and also to do with social injustice that affects us, the descendants of people who were taken into slavery and forced to be for generations under slavery for nearly well over 300 years. And it's kind of a poem centered around how, even though slavery ended, physical slavery, where people were put in chains and held in places, but even in today's world, there is still mental slavery, there is still brainwashing and people feeling inferior to others. And so, like I said before, I'm from a mixed heritage, so I have more than like about four different races that are in my mixed family, and so I'm proud of all of them. I claim all my heritage, and but this particular family heritage is to do with my African ancestors who were taken from West Africa, so that's like taken from what would have been Benin, which the Dahomey, which is like the kingdom that had the all-female warrior bodyguards, and they, I think in Black Panther film, the women, the bald-headed female bodyguards of T'Challa, which was the main character, the king of Wakanda, that is actually, they're based on real women who existed. So yeah, my family descend from part of the families from Benin, which would have been connected to the people who would have I think Benin and Togo they call it now, and Nigeria as well, and some Ghanaian as well. So that's all from West Africa. That was mainly where people were being taken from. So yeah, so this poem I've written, I'm going to read it now. It's quite long, but I'm proud to read it. So the title I chose for it is Never Be Like the Evil We're Fighting Against. We descend from warriors. Okay, so here goes. Through the corridors of time, one thing that destroys like a landmine, many people with mouths full of lies, so much deceit and bad intentions in their eyes. The proof they cannot hide of the evil they tried to justify. So much injustice, hypocrisy, and oppression causing riots in the streets. They took everything we ever had, and yet it was still not enough to gratify the monstrous minds full of hate, greed, and sloth. From cradle to grave, the game has been set up against us, but we will fight the good fight, still relentless. I never want to hear their excuses. How dare you pretend you had never abused generations of human beings who had the birthright to be free. We despise your lies, your hate, your evil heart. You knew you were wrong right from the very start. It could all be so simple, but you'd rather make it hard, needlessly leaving generations scarred. How dare you refuse to treat people fairly and equally? You put people in chains. What's been done is unforgivable and absolutely insane, leaving us with unforgettable, never-ending generational pain. Our ancestors' cries fell on deaf, evil ears and sadly magnified the fears that the ones they held dear could be sold and bought without any remorse or sympathetic thought. But our ancestors carried a fire and a courage within their heart to fight, to move forward through the darkest night. An unbreakable warrior spirit that reminded them to take back their rights. The blood and the pain overflowed like dirt in the rain, but the war is not yet over. Society must go much further to make sure that the higher to make sure that history's past stain cannot sustain. Fighting to remain free of the nights of terror that many had no choice but to see. We break chains, we teach all brains by exposing history's evil false claims of our people. For your descendants, the walk has been hard, but with the strength of your bloodlines, we will always be on guard to keep fighting against injustice, oppression, and the like, because we refuse to endure more scars and to lose our birthright. I don't want anyone to die for me. Don't cry for me, just live for me and just fight till we are all set free. To stop history repeating is our main goal. We're passing on the knowledge to remind all. To remind all not to be a sellout and to always be proud and to never forget the greatness from which we came and to never be afraid to shout it aloud. We must be the change we want to see in the world. We must refuse to be like the evil we are fighting against. We need to remember to unite, live and let live, and help each other. Dear ancestors, please watch over us. Please walk by our side and protect us. In times of trouble, I remember what you endured, and I remember that you had survived much worse atrocities. And so I must get up every time the bad of this world knocks me down and treats me unfairly. And I must remember to never bow my head to anyone, ever. Ancestors, lend us your strength. Keep us close. Lift us up when we think we can't go on. Keep us in the warmth of your love. Keep us safe till we depart this world. Then come to take us home, safe and sound. So that was my poem, and even though I'm specifically talking about my African ancestors, you know, anyone who's had ancestors who suffered, any human being, it doesn't matter what race they are, anyone who knows of that people they were related to have suffered, or even if you just have sympathy and compassion for the suffering of other human beings, even if they're not from your ancestry or whatever, it doesn't matter. You can still have sympathy and empathy, you know, and consider that what was done to those people was wrong. You know, like a man can have sympathy and compassion for a woman who's been through being AR'd. He doesn't have to be a victim of R to have sympathy for a female. You know what I mean? So just because we're different, you know, nationalities or race or whatever, doesn't mean we can't all relate to the fact that as a human being, we want to be treated fairly. We don't want to be, you know, abused. We want to be given a fair shot, a fair chance in life. And to know that there are some people who just walking down the street, they have to fear for their lives because some evil police officer could see them, lie about what they're doing and just take their life. You know, that's evil, that's awful. But that's the reality we live in. Other people can actually go up to the police, punch them in the face, knock their hat off, steal their car, go and run over a load of people, but they will be carefully arrested. They won't get killed, they won't get hurt, you know, they won't even get a bump on the head. But other people could be jogging or sitting in their house or sitting in their car eating a burger, and some evil monster, demonic monster will come up and take their life just because their skin is a different color to theirs. And it's just so painful to know that this is happening. And this is why I write these poems, because, you know, I do carry with me a lot of sadness and anger and hurt to think that so many hundreds of years ago, some terrible, awful atrocities were allowed to take place and continue for centuries against specifically my ancestry, which is my African ancestry, even though I'm mixed, but I'm very close to my Jamaican ancestry, which obviously descends back to African ancestry. And so, you know, even if I wasn't mixed with that group, I would still be horrified and feel the same anger and rage at the fact that any human being was mistreated so disgustingly for so long en masse, all based on skin color. you know it's so disgusting. And so for me, like, I'm a historian. I look at all history, ancient history. It doesn't have to be just with my ancestry. I look at world history, and there is so much hate and pain. And it's like, sometimes it can be people of the same race abusing each other. It doesn't even have to just be colour. If you look at Ireland, for instance, where the Irish live, that they're all genetically, the same DNA, but they will, use being Catholic or Protestant as a reason to hate each other and kill each other. Or you have, like in some ways, human beings seem to always find a way to separate themselves in a negative way, instead of looking at the things that make us similar, the things we have in common. They will look for what makes us different, what makes us, what can we use against others, trying to, I don't know, it's weird to me. Like for instance, like I said, in Ireland, they're all DNA wise the same race, but yet the Catholics hate the Protestants hate the Catholics, so they use that as an excuse to kill in the name of God, even though God would not want them to kill each other in his name. But it's like, then you have, like, say if everyone took away religion, okay, then they would find a way to say, okay, well, the rich hate the poor and the poor hate the rich, so that's another division, class systems. Then you take that away, then it will be the men hating the women, and then it will be the married people hating the non-married people, the people who are like single mothers or unwed mothers. They will get trampled on by the people who look down on that. Like, for some sick reason, the human nature is not a positive thing. Like, I'm not saying that there aren't positive human beings out there, but it feels as if, even when you look back in history, there is a lot more bad stuff than there are triumphant, amazing, unifying moments in history. And it's so depressing. Like, when I'll do my research for as a historian, and I'll just be feeling like my heart is so heavy, because all I see is sadness and cruelty and just the most disgusting, awful things that were allowed to take place, and it's just very, very painful. I mean, even like, because slavery wasn't just in, the when the Portuguese first started taking African people from Africa and putting them in their colonies, and then the British started doing it, the Americans started doing it. It wasn't just started at that point. Slavery was going on long before, like way back in time. It was just the powerful against the weak. If you happen to be not have weapons, and say the Romans showed up in your village or where you lived, and they have weapons and a big strong army, and there's only 1,000 of your village people, and then there's like a lot more, thousands and thousands of Roman soldiers who are saying, this is ours now, we're going to kidnap you, you got no say. You could try and fight back, and a lot of people did, but then it's like, some people were too scared to fight back. Some people were like, wow, I'd rather live, than, try and fight back and lose. Whereas I'm the opposite. I would rather die fighting than live under your whip or under your, tyranny. So like, when I've done a lot of research about people, who were rebelling against slave owners in Jamaica and stuff, our national heroes in Jamaica, and a lot of them, they were kidnapped as adults who were already strong warriors, who were already, intelligent people. They were not, little kids who, could be easily snatched up. They were obviously ambushed and taken, but the second they got free, And I'm talking about on the ship. The second like the rope was taken off their hands, they were fighting. And even though they knew, if I jump off this boat, I'm probably gonna die, but I would rather take the chance to die, or I'm willing to die to keep my freedom, than stay with these kidnapping evil people. And they didn't even know where they were being taken. They had no idea the terrible generations of slavery that was ahead of them and their children, their children's children, their great grandchildren. They had no idea of this when they're being snatched up and ambushed. Imagine, people, you like, imagine us right now. You're walking down the street, someone kidnaps you. You're a grown adult in your 30s. Maybe you're a kickboxing expert, maybe you're a boxer, maybe you're a self-defense teacher, so you're strong and intelligent. You don't take crap from anybody, but someone ambushes you, kidnaps you, suddenly you're on a boat tied up, you don't know what's going on. Then the second your hands are free, you're going to fight back. You're not going to sit there and think, oh well, maybe it's not too bad where they're taking me. You're going to want to get home. You're going to want to get back to your family. You're going to want to get back to your kids or your country. So there were so many people who fought back and had to literally jump from the boat, and their life was, they whether they realized they were going to die or not, they made that decision that I would rather die than let these abusers take me somewhere. I don't know what they're going to do with me, but I can see how they've ambushed me and taken me, and I'm not willing to, if I can't beat them, I would rather die. And it's like, even with when you think about the Navy, how the British Navy used to press gang people. Now that's a different subject, but it's kidnapping. They used to kidnap people and they called it press ganging when they needed a crew for a ship. It was like they didn't have enough men, so sometimes they would literally go into a pub or a tavern, like a bar, and they would put I think it's the Queen's shilling, which is a coin. They would put this coin in their booze, in their cup of beer, and then after they drank it, they'd be like, oh my god, why is this coin in my drink? And once they held the coin, they'd say, oh, you accepted the king's shilling, or I think it was a king's shilling because it was a king at the time, probably George III, in the 1700s, at that time when press ganging was quite more popular. And then they were just taken, and then if they tried to escape, they probably were beaten or threatened with murder. And so some people, they would just think, oh my gosh, I've stuck here, I have no choice, I'm already on the boat, if I jump off I'll die. Maybe I can stow away, like escape when we stop the boat somewhere. But then you'll be in another country where you might not know the language, where you don't know anyone. So there was all these weird things going on throughout history where people are being snatched up and kidnapped and abused and tortured and whatever it was. Like, it wasn't just the transatlantic slave trade. Way back in history, there was always the strong abusing the weak. It was always who's stronger, who's going to take from this person. Are you going to stop me taking it? Even when people didn't need the land you had, look at how Alexander the Great, he's put down in history as an amazing person. Oh, he was so young. Oh, he conquered so many lands. He did not need any of those places he conquered, just like Julius Caesar did not need to go all over the place conquering other people, raping, killing, looting, subjugating people. They didn't need to do that. The Romans didn't have to do that. They chose to do that. They chose to, abuse their power and take over other people's, cities and communities and force them to yield to them and, let them control them. And it was very, very, and if they couldn't control them, they would just burn everything, raise it. They used to say raise it to the ground, meaning burn it to the ground. Then they would even salt the earth, put salt in the crops, in the dirt, so that crops couldn't grow anymore. So they would damage the ability for those people to feed themselves and have a harvest and have food. So they effectively starving them, not just the present people, but for future generations. How evil is that? I mean, oh, it's so painful to know that for centuries that evil just kept surviving. It's so sad to know that good didn't thrive, because yes, there'd be pockets of good here and there'd be people rising up against bad, but it's just so sad to see the majority of the things in history, even like past and present, you know we can just see with the world wars, like the First World War, Britain and Germany. If you look at how those things started, those things were not civilians' choices. Those weren't like a civil war where civilians took up weapons. These were royal family members arguing amongst themselves, arguing about power. The richness and the power they had wasn't enough. So then now they want, or they were offended by another. I think it was like Queen Victoria's grandson, the Kaiser Wilhelm, was offended by the fact that he felt rejected by the family, and then after she died, then he thought, oh, I can now go to war with my cousin who's King George V in England because my grandma's dead. She was the only reason I wasn't going to war, you know. And then why was he going to war? Just because he fell out with his cousin, because the cousin picked on him when he was a kid and he had a disabled hand or something. Like, it's so ridiculous when you look at why these people were willing to let millions of their country's people go to war for their petty little ego, dent. It's so disgusting, and oh, my heart bleeds for all the lives lost. And it's sad because so many of the soldiers were just young men who lied about their age. They could have been 16, but they lied and said they were 20 or 19 or 18, and then a lot of them sometimes were conscripted, which means they were forced to go. Any able-bodied male of a certain age was forced to go. And I think, was that, I can't remember if that was during the first or the second, so it's annoying because I'm a historian, I should remember this fact, but just for a second it slipped out of my mind. But yeah, like, to think that you don't even have a choice, and if you did hide and try and like just not go to war because you thought this is ridiculous, it's not, there's no reason for me to die and go to war, people would shame you, call you a coward. So if you were sensitive to that, you'd feel bad that your community thinks you're a coward because you're not a coward. But at the same time, if you went to war and died horribly, somehow you're a hero, even though some would say, is it stupidity or is it bravery? Well, it's like you had no choice. You had to go, and if you didn't go, they put you in prison. And then, if you did go, then you end up with a mental breakdown or dead. Or, but then it's like your family are given the medal, but you're dead. It's just, and then it's like, yes, okay, someone could go to war and be brave, and I'm not calling anyone a coward who went to war. I'm just saying they had no choice. If they had the choice, I'm pretty sure they would not want to leave their families and die terribly. It's different if you actually were in the army, you chose to be a soldier, and that was what you chose. Then by all means, that is the life you chose. But if you were just at home with your family and then suddenly you're being conscripted to go to another country to fight for something you don't even know why you're fighting, like there was a what was it, they there were some stories I'd found where young teenage, like, English soldiers during World War I were in their trench, and then there's a big area with barbed wire and a big muddy area between the German trenches and the English, the British Army trenches. And they said that, I think it was like Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, and someone had a football or made a football out of something, and no, there was like a ceasefire. They literally had a ceasefire, and they were playing football the two enemy sides, and they literally were like, why are we even fighting? I don't even know why I'm fighting you. Like, and I'm not laughing, that's just me, that's just the way I talk. I'm not laughing at war or death or suffering. I just want to make that clear. And they literally did not know what is going on, and yet they could, for a moment, when they weren't being forced by their governments to hate each other, they were having fun as teenagers, and they could see the commonality of, we're both young men and we like football. But then their officers were like, stop talking to them, they're the enemy, don't get close to them, because when the time comes we'll have to kill them. And they're just like, people will say, oh, I was just following orders. But it's like, it's just such an awful situation when you're being forced to, you know be in a terrible war. And then when you look through history at how did that war get started, or why was it happening, it was such a trivial reason of the powers that be, who were just so pathetic and egotistical and did not care about the lives of anyone underneath them. It's very, very sad. But yeah, it's interesting how people in this day and age, 2024, descendants of people who have suffered terribly in the past, whether it's, people like me who have African DNA, even if it's a big bit, a small bit, even if you're full-blooded, part-blooded, whatever. I'm sad to see people not acknowledging their African DNA, being ashamed of it, being like hoping that people don't see it in them. If they're mixed, they want to pass for something else. If they're, pale enough, because the part of their African DNA is so far back, they kind of appear like a white Irish or a white English, people, or a Greek or a Spanish person. They don't appear like someone who's carrying black DNA, African DNA. And because of the way the world has convinced everyone that black people are inferior, which is not true, that is rubbish, because Africa, before slavery, before the transatlantic slave trade got huge, there was so much richness and intelligence and organized, amazing civilizations in Africa, that when these Portuguese and other people showed up at trading posts in Africa, and the French and the Dutch and all these people, when they got there, they were jealous. They were like, wow, look how much gold they have, or look how civilized their cities are, just because they're wearing less clothing and not Victorian clothing, not Victorian, clothing from like the 1600s, when these people were going over there, or even if it was the 1400s when people were first trading, like as way back as the late 1400s. I'm talking like Christopher Columbus time, way back then. There were African sailors traveling around the world, trading with Native Americans, trading like all over the place. A lot of the maps that these Europeans used were from North Africans. So even though North Africa is different to West Africa for the cultures and the way the people look or whatever, the fact that Africa as a continent, even if it's the different parts of Africa, they were intelligent and had things going on that people were jealous of and people were using. So when you see an astrolabe, which is like I think it's something you use to track the stars, and forgive me if I'm getting that wrong, but those things were like from, I think, North Africa, I think, or like the ones, I'll have to, yeah, I'm pretty sure they were from like Muslim communities, and then the information gets passed along and traded and whatever. I mean, look at like how Vikings made it all the way to America but didn't settle the whole country, just set up a tiny little temporary village, stone village, and then left. But people don't want to admit that anyone before Columbus was in America. Well, what about the Native Americans? Do you forget about them? They were already there for thousands, millions of years. So how can you say that Columbus discovered America? He was lost, and how did even when the English people went over to America, how did they survive? The Native Americans helped them. Unfortunately, the Native Americans had no idea these people they were helping, the descendants of those people, would obliterate their people, which is awful, an awful atrocity that the people are still being touched by that destruction even now. The modern people, the descendants of Native Americans, early Native Americans, are still being affected by lack of opportunities and disrespect for their culture and their race. Just like how people who are descended from early Africans are still being affected by the destruction and the disrespect that was set up the false claims that people aren't human and all sorts of rubbish. People are unintelligent and all this rubbish. I mean, why, if people are so unintelligent and you have to put a law up to tell people do not teach them to read, why are you so afraid of them learning to read and write? I thought they weren't human, I thought they weren't intelligent. But that if you bring a ton of slaves over who clearly you are afraid they're intelligent, and that's why you prevent anyone teaching them to read and write. You prevent anyone giving them anything that could improve their already innate intelligence. They're already intelligent whether you teach them to read or write or not, because most human beings are going to be intelligent even if you don't teach them to read and write. Not everyone, because some people, they have to be taught a lot of stuff before they thrive, but some people are naturally intelligent, and that has nothing to do with race. And the fact that laws were put in place to stop people, letting them learn how to read. Like, why were you so afraid of them learning things? Getting knowledge, getting information, hearing things or reading things that were going on in the society. And it's so upsetting when you think of all the things that happened to people during slavery. When you think of the humiliation and the torture and the rapes and the disgusting atrocities that happened, it's unthinkable, it's unforgivable. You couldn't believe what you're reading. Like, when I've read some of the things that were done to the men, women and children, God, it just makes me want to puke with rage. I'm so angry. I'm sad at the same time, but I'm furious. Like, that's the biggest emotion, is fury and anger and wishing I could go back in time and put a stop to all of it, stop it ever happening. And it's so painful. And that's why I don't understand how people in this day and age do not respect the ancestors that have come before them, who had to go through so much and had dealt with so many terrible atrocities. I can't understand how anyone would say, like that stupid Kanye West saying, "Oh, slavery was a choice." Are you crazy? Are you actually crazy to say something like that? That's like saying rape is a choice. Like, you're crazy and sick to say that, especially coming from a black background. That's really embarrassing to see that, how easily people will be brainwashed to go against their own people. That he obviously believes the conditioning of hundreds of years of telling the world that black people are nothing, black people are inferior, they're animals, they're inhuman, they're not human. That's, he literally, he's acting like he loves himself so much. No, he doesn't. Because if he loved himself, he would respect and love his ancestors and never say such a crackpot crazy thing, so disrespectful and ridiculous. But it's just, yeah, you can see how people now, like, for instance, look at Michael Jackson, how he kept changing his nose. That's all to do with inferiority. That his own father, who is not white, his father is just a lighter skinned black guy who might have some mixture, but he is telling his own son, "You're ugly. That big nose is not my nose." And when you look at the dad, that's his nose. He's got this. The mum has a slimmer nose. So the dad's family, they're inheriting the dad's nose or the granddad's nose from the dad's family. It's clearly his family trait. And he's so stupid that he's even insulting his own features from his own family that his kids have inherited. And it's just, and I'm not laughing. When I make that sound, I'm not laughing at all. It's more a disbelief, like, what the heck is going on? Why are people of color, whether they're mixed, light or dark, anyone with African ancestry or who grew up around people who are in the black community, why are you informing your kids they're not good enough? Because the world is going to tell them that. So you should be telling them the opposite. You are good enough. You are beautiful. You look like our ancestors. That is normal. That is good. We are strong, powerful people. We have suffered, but we're still here. Be proud of that, you know. And then Michael Jackson wouldn't have had that thought in his head that I'm so ugly, I'm so ugly. And then the dad was an abuser and beat them up and did horrible things to them. So obviously he's, you know, wanting to get away from the dad. And I think Michael Jackson even said, "I hate that I look like my dad," or anything on his face that reminds him of his dad he wants to get rid of. And the nose is similar to the dad's nose. So that was the weirdest thing, that the dad was self-hating himself, but instead of taking it out on himself, he took it out on his own son. So you can tell the dad must have hated himself, had self-hate of his own nose, because why, if the child has your nose, why are you telling him he's ugly, you know? And so, and then obviously Michael Jackson had vitiligo. It caused pale patches on his skin where the melanin was reducing and disappearing. So when he became pale, that genuinely was a skin condition called vitiligo. However, he wouldn't have just turned white like milk overnight. He would have had patches of brown all over his skin where, you know, but obviously big patches of white where the melanin is disappearing. So I think he was told by doctors, well, if you've got more white patches than brown, you could bleach off the brown and just be one color rather than taking the time to put makeup all over your body. And then if Michael Jackson had just said, and like to the world, I have vitiligo, I did use bleaching cream to take off the little bit of brown that was left, I'm embarrassed about it, I didn't do it because I hate my race or my color. But then there is some self-hate in him that made him want to look like he wasn't black, even though he grew up around black community. You know, there are a lot of people who have black blood or who are looking fully black or have darker skin, or even people who are more beige skinned and mixed, they even want to be white. There is this terrible brainwashing and self-hating that has been happening for centuries, and it all goes back to slavery. You know, because before the transatlantic slave trade, slavery was based on who was the most powerful. It was nothing to do with color, because you could have white people taken into slavery. You had people taken from, you know, England, the Celts. They were white, but they were kidnapped by the Romans and taken to the slave markets in Rome and whatever. And the people from Scandinavia, blonde hair, blue eyes, who would ever imagine people who looked like that would have been taken and put in slave markets? But in Rome, anyone could be kidnapped. It didn't matter what color you were. You would just, if you couldn't defend yourself and get away from them kidnapping you and putting you into slavery, because they were doing it for the money. It wasn't anything to do with convincing the world, oh, these people are nothing. They're animals, they're inferior, because it wasn't based on that. It wasn't based on an agenda to say, you know, these people, we have to only use them as like a horse or a donkey, you know, because when the Romans took people, you could actually buy your freedom and become a citizen of Rome, you know, very quickly, you know. And then there was also there were stories even when Caligula, one of the emperors, was um, in power in Rome, and his servants or slaves were so powerful because he didn't keep them down in chains. They were in fine clothes and they were given a lot of power. And obviously, he is the more powerful than them. But what I mean is, it wasn't the same as the way people were um, treated, like the African people. It was like targeting their color and their race, as if to say, well, because they look this way, they don't look like us, we're going to use that, we're going to convince the world that they're nothing. And then that way, it doesn't matter how we treat them, no one will question why we treat them badly, what we do to them. I mean, oh, it's just so painful when I've read all the terrible things. And imagine the stuff that's not documented. These are, stories I've read of actual people who were in slavery. I've read, the stories that got written down for them of their experience, um, and the things they saw and had to witness. It's just, I can't believe, it's so unbelievably cruel and evil and hurtful and painful to know that they had to suffer through that. And the thought that nobody, like, if anyone has no sympathy for someone who's been through all that terror and pain and atrocity, then you must be evil. Even if it's not your ancestry or people, you don't have to know them. Why would you need to know someone to feel bad for their suffering? Like, I feel bad for all the Jewish people who were killed in the Holocaust. I don't have any Jewish connection, but I've always, because I respect every human being. I don't have any animosity to any human being. To me, it's good against evil. So as long as you're good, it doesn't matter what race you are. If you're good, I'm with you. If you're evil, I'm not with you. So it's like, yeah, it's really astonishing how evil this world is and how many terrible things have happened. And it makes you worry that, well, what will happen in the future? Like, if things keep just, things are still already disgusting. There are still innocent people getting killed for no reason and people getting away with these things, people in power abusing their power. It's just so painful. And but yes, so that's all for now. I hope people enjoy my videos. I appreciate anyone who watches my videos. Please like, share and subscribe, and have a look through my channel. There's many different videos about many different subjects, but the main purpose of my videos are to try and, like, spread positive thoughts and words. And like, I don't mean for anyone to feel like I'm against white people, because that's not true. I'm mixed race. I have white people in my family. And but when I talk about my African ancestors, I am going to talk with that feeling of sadness and rage towards what was done to them. And it just so happens the people who did it to them were Europeans, whether they were Portuguese or white English or white Scottish or, American whites, or whoever it was who was doling out the evil. I'm not blaming the people who exist now, who are good people, who happen to be white. Even if you were a descendant and you're of a slave owner, like, say, like, I know people in America who they have, great 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 grandparents who owned slaves and things, and I speak to them about it and say, wow, that's some crazy, like, it almost makes me go, oh my gosh, I'm not sure if I want to speak to you. And then I have to remind myself that, well, why would I not want to speak to them? Because they're the descendant, they can't help who their great 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 grandparents were. Just like I can't, if I had a great 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 grandparent who had been a murderer or a rapist or something bad, I wouldn't be expected to be punished for what that person did, because I'm related to people who were Europeans and whites, and they could have been the slave owner, and then I'm related to the slaves too who were kidnapped, because we're mixed. So if you're related to that mixed race person who is a result of the rapes, then you're actually technically related to the slave owner and the slave. Now, obviously, I reject the slave owner and totally am on the side of the slave, but I would not want to be held accountable for what that slave owning person did, because to me, I don't claim that evil person, and I am not responsible for the evil choices they made. And even if they weren't holding the whip and they were just paying the person who did, they're still evil. They still were okay with abusing human beings and working them to death and raping them and torturing them, or letting people do this to them. And this was constant. I can't even talk about it anymore because it's making me so mad. But yeah, like I said, I don't have anything against white people or that exist now who are not, who are descended from, slave owning people. I don't have anything against you as long as you're not racist. If you're racist, then I'm not on your side, obviously. But like I said, it's good against evil. I'm on the side of good, no matter what race you are. If you're good, I'm on your side. And it doesn't matter what race you are. Just like if you're bad, I'm not on your side, and it doesn't matter what race you are. Meaning that I'm not going to take the side of someone who's the same race or mixture as me because we're the same background, is what I'm saying. I hope that makes sense. Sometimes I'm talking so fast, I'm like, am I making sense? Yes, anyway, so yeah, like I said, I live and let live. I love and accept everyone, and I don't, hold any animosity towards descendants of people who were bad people. That is not our cross to bear. We're not responsible for what other people in history who are related to us did. Okay. Yeah, so anyway, God bless everyone around the world. Have a great day, evening or night, wherever you are in this world, and try and keep strong. Life is hard. We should try our best to, if you can't go out into the world and do loads of good, kind things because maybe you're not in a position where you have enough finances to share your finances, or you might be depressed and you just don't feel like you can interact with people. So I understand that, because some days, even though I'm a kind empath and I love helping others, sometimes you're so depressed you don't want to go outside, you don't want anyone to talk to you. Some days, with all the pain and the things you've gone through, you're not even sure if you can go on, and so those are the times you have to pray for strength to keep going. And even if you just go out into the world and do no harm and just exist as your good, decent self, that is enough. You don't have to go, like, it's not possible for you to go out and save the world every single day. And as long as you don't go around harming people, and even if you're just praying for the world, praying for for peace to come to this world, you're doing something good. You're trying to raise the vibration, you're trying to go against the evil and chip away at the evil by just being a good soul. That is enough. So anyway, goodbye everyone, and that's all for now. Bye for now.